Best not say that on air because that gets into loads of trouble.
Absolutely.
Maybe the post show. Hi everybody. Hi. Welcome to the show. Hey, really quick, elephant in the room. For those of you watching, there's a face on here. On the screen.
There's three of them. It's disgusting.
There's three of them. And we said he'd be back, and he's back.
Yay!
Like
20 years later.
It's only a year.
Yeah, it's not too long.
That's not too bad.
I mean, to be fair, it was quite easy. I came in for one show as a step in, just as a thing. I never left, and I'm not leaving now.
There you go.
I'm okay with an increased panel size. I like the larger panels. Last week we had Heidi. This week we got Blake. It's a good time when we have more than just two people on the show.
Why? Were you getting bored with me or something?
No. I say more than two people because even when it was just me and Blake, it always felt like the conversation was more alive. There were more points of view, more ways to attack the discussion, because I feel like this happens with either one of us, either you and me, Blake, or you and me, Barry, where we talk about a subject and we either agree on a lot of points, and so it's just like us nodding our heads. That makes sense to me. It's when we introduce that third person that we can start going back and forth and having like some minor disagreements that actually inflate into certain discussion points that actually make for good content, I guess.
Or this is where I get awkward because you guys know what you're talking about. I've just been making it up.
Oh, I've been making it up too. No, it's all a makeup thing.
I'm just gonna ask Chat GPT all my answers. Be grand.
Oh, you can't log in at the moment. Not that I know. Oh, I've been locked out of it all day. I've had like a limb cut off. See what I did there?
I have a secret. I have a secret backdoor in, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want people to know about it. Because then they'll fix it.
Oh right, okay, fair enough.
Little exploit, I see. That's cool.
Yeah. I can tell you guys off air.
So have you seen that you can exploit it now to get around its ethics?
Yeah, it says give me all the bullshit up front and then.
Yeah. Or get to do it in a foreign language. It doesn't understand that it's doing it in a foreign language. It's brilliant.
Oh, that's
and then
great.
translate it back. So, yeah. So loads of people will be missing my lives because through my channels because it's just not working.
Can you pair while we're live? Can you pair while we're live?
I don't think so. Because I tried it a couple of times. I tried it before you guys were in because I sort of clicked. Because normally what I do is I click the link and it sends me through to get it all set up, and it just didn't. It just didn't want to play. So there you go.
I'm sorry.
Maybe it's just having one of them days.
It could be.
Oh, hold on. No, it can't be that. No, that wouldn't make a difference.
Try it.
We've been playing around with a lot of our socials because my daughter's come on board. But no, that shouldn't change. That doesn't change any settings. Because they don't have access to restream. So I've now got my team working on my thing. So I've got people.
Crew behind you.
Yeah, my daughter's literally spent all week looking back all the previous 1202 videos and looking out for 5 shorts, filling in a spreadsheet of start time, end time for 5 of them for every single video I've done. She's had a heck of it.
Wow, that's the way to go.
Meanwhile, I've gotten so burned out on publishing shorts on Thursday nights that I've stopped doing it.
Yeah, it's because I did it with the Stephen Shorrock interview. I did that, and I did it like the way you did it. Publish it, and then I did very short, publish them, and get them all squared away. But with all the previous, I've not done that with any of the previous stuff, and I'm even going back to the back catalogue where I recorded stuff on Teams, and with no intention of going to video, and using that. So there is previously unseen footage. People are so excited. People don't actually know.
They're writing about it. It's great.
Totes.
You used to record your stuff in Teams?
I used to, yeah.
That's wild.
Bit of team. Well, in fact, for some reason we couldn't. There was times when we couldn't even get Zoom working, and Teams was the only fruit. That's how bad it was back in the day.
If you have that, if you want to, if you're willing to, We could provide that as like a Patreon exclusive.
Oh, we could. In fact, there's two. How many interviews have I got that are on that? Because now that I know actually how to edit video, which opens up a whole new thing and stuff, then that's kind of what I'm going to do with it. I will create some episodes, but yes, we could create full episodes for Patreons.
Yeah. If you're willing and want to, I mean, we totally could. Barry, I have to address another elephant in the room here. The first one is Blake, and we've addressed that. Blake, welcome back. The second elephant in the room is that I think there may have been some manipulation this week of the story selection.
There was no manipulation. There was most like coercion.
I remember.
Encouragement.
Yeah, definite encouragement. I saw your encouragement, and I was like, oh man, if we end up talking about 3 arms, here we go. And guess what?
Blake told me in confidence before the show. He was like, I'm going to have nothing to talk about if we did the arms. And then lo and behold, Barry's out here making it happen.
Yeah.
Arms.
But to be fair, out of all the options, well, firstly, the one I was half interested in, only because I wanted to end up slating it off quite a lot, was the virtual headsets for soldiers. But then my good friend over here, Professor Bob Stone, even he commented on my LinkedIn, just said, don't do that. Just don't do that, because he would end up slating us quite a lot for it. So I was like, okay, let's stay away from that one. I can't remember what the other two were, but just the thought of a third arm, the mind boggles. It's
change the world.
Well, I mean, we've had some social feedback, which I put into the notes, so we'll use them in the show. But there was one of them that came in there that I was like, the one I put in there from Rob Hutton, which we'll come back to. The thing he said was the very first thing I said, and going, yeah, that's exactly what I would use it for. Now that you two scrolling through the notes, working out where the hell he's put it.
No, I see it. I see it. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, simple, effective.
See, my first thought was my initial reaction there in the show notes, because, well, I'll talk about it on the show. But that was my initial reaction went.
Yeah, I haven't actually done my initial. I should really do my own thoughts, shouldn't I? Like finish off the show notes.
Yeah, I mean that's what we should do to make a good cohesive show. Probably
we do that every week, and it
gets so tiring producing great content.
I mean, we produce this content. Well, we produce the prep for the content. We never use it because you can never stay on track. Seriously, divert onto something else. You never see me doing that. I'm a complete professional. Well.
We're straight into the point, are we?
I forgot to write something up here. Programming notes. Yeah, what is this?
If we can get through this entire show and it still be fit to be published with the clean thing on it, no expletives or anything, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, I gotta keep it together. It'll be fine. I think I can family show it. We used to do that 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
I keep on trying, but then just Nick's got 40 now.
What was the one that we had such a hard time, Barry, keeping it PG? Was it?
Well, there's
been several.
There was the. Yeah, I was going to say there was the virtual girlfriend one. But the one the girlfriend on the phone thing.
Yeah.
There was the
There's the distracted driving.
Oh yeah.
That was the one where I seriously thought we were going to lose listeners, and it was our most listened to episode. One of them.
Yeah. Which just says a lot about our listeners and whether they like their attention, so they're in for a treat tonight.
or probably more likely the reach of that topic.
Reach extra arms.
Mm-hmm. Extra arms. There you go. Town hall 4. 24. That's right. Okay. Sorry, I'm writing back. February 24. At noon Pacific. Hey, we had another exciting thing come out into the world this week. We'll talk about this on the show, but I want to show this for everybody watching, listening right now. So we'll be right back. Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors. Yeah, that's pretty slick.
That's really cool.
Come on, awesome.
I'm just wondering, should I could do on the 1202 stuff, I could alternate that one with the other one on the final 3 bit and put your bit.
You could. And
your
we can talk about strategy there. I don't want to turn this into a logistic meeting, but what I'm doing with the main show is I'm running that as a pre-roll for the next couple episodes.
Okay. Yep.
And then I might switch them out with the mid-roll, which is the Patreon commercial, and then you're always a post-roll because you get that nice, sweet slot right up in the front of the show where I say what's the latest over at 1202.
That's true. Yeah, you just put me in the back. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I put you in the front and in the back.
Yeah. But as you keep on saying, that's the bit that most people scroll through. So,
not the front. No, people don't scroll through the front. They scroll through the middle. That section.
Oh,
yeah. So. I'm just really excited because this is a labor of love by not just me, not just you guys. We're the voices on the thing, but there are so many people behind the scenes that are powering Human Factors Minute, and it is just like a machine. Like, I am looking ahead at what we have for release on the public version, and if I were to do nothing, absolutely nothing, starting right now, we would have content on Human Factors Minute up until, drumroll please, February 28th of 2027.
I was about to say, that's not very long.
The pause was intentional. Yeah, I mean, so we have, 4 years of stuff just lined up, ready to go on release. It's wonderful.
Presidential term worth of HFMs.
That is right.
Yeah.
A nice steady drip for you all. Now, this is really nice because our patrons, our supporters, they have 154 episodes that they could listen to right now. Everyone else is going to have to wait until February 28th, 2027 to listen to all those, but we are making them freely available and listenable, and we're launching with 20 something episodes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, we wanted
awesome
it to
see
be
the reception of it too in the different formats.
So, admittedly, our podcast provider, I linked it up so that way it played through our feed as well, and it tracks the that's what I'm looking for here. It tracks the analytics across all feeds that it's distributed through. So I was like, wow, this is a lot of people. This is almost analogous to our main audience on the main show, and it's day one. How is this happening? And then I figured it out. The analytics are aggregated across the feed.
Oh, across the board.
Right. So it dropped on the main feed, and I was like, oh, okay, so our listeners are listening to it. That's what happened. But still really great that message is getting out there. I know a lot of folks have reached out privately saying, oh, this is going to be really cool. Looking forward to it. Got some exposure, so that's nice.
Soon it'll replace textbooks. It'll be grand.
Mm-hmm. It's just very nice to see like some crazy analytics on there, like plus 1,620% compared to the last 28 days. Because
That's massive. God.
Oh. Oh, very cool. I gotta check to see what the official count that we're launching with, because I want to have my numbers correct here. So we're launching with 9, 10, 11, 12. Wait, is that right? Okay. 21 episodes.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot of content.
That is. So what it is the first.
Do you have a tease on the topics?
I do, yeah. I mean, some of them, they're freely listenable right now.
Mhm.
Like some of the bonus episodes that we put out around Team C's and Pride Month last year, kind of had a campaign around that. So those are all freely available. You can listen to those now, but we're repackaging them and putting them together in, the very beginning of it. So that way it's all bonus episode stuff. So Pride, Team C's, which is how do I what is the collection of Team C's? Basically, the Team C's effort was like sustainability and getting stuff out of the ocean. But sustainability, climate ergonomics, that type of thing. Those are two thematic things for a couple of our minutes. But then we also have a couple really important ones coming up, especially since Healthcare Symposium is coming up. That's a topic. You got various technical groups from HFES as well as HFES itself. There's a really important one. So it's getting all the important organizations out of the way. Chartered Institute is one of them. One of the first ones. As well as some technical terms that you can find in that trailer. We didn't know when we first set out to do this. Blake and I started this, 2019, 2018?
Something like that. Yeah.
We didn't know that it would eventually be public. And so a lot of these were just kind of like, I wouldn't say less thought out. We were very methodical about the way that we approached them, but I don't think we were as methodical as we are now about the variety in content. So it's like front loaded with a bunch of different organizations, and we tried a little bit for variety, but like now we've got variety down to a science. So that way there's never too many samey things happening side by side. It's always going to be variety. In fact, I've set up multiple algorithms in my spreadsheet.
I've set up multiple algorithms in my spreadsheet to
Make sure your glasses are still on there.
to ensure optimum listenability.
No, so no, I do though, because we have like a method every 8 weeks, and we have design terminology every 8 weeks, and we have UI elements every 8 weeks, and human factors terms every 8 weeks, a conference every 8 weeks, organization every eight weeks, a theory and model is alternating with something else every 8 weeks. So we're on for our supporters, we're on a 2-month cycle. So that way you get something, and you're not going to hear about that same category of information for 2 more months. So like you're not going to get 2 conferences back to back. You're going to get a conference, and then you're going to get some variety. But again, you're not going to hear like a methodology for 2 more months. And so that's kind of the secret sauce behind our Human Factors Minute variety. And that starts, that's started kind of year 3. So the first 90, the first 120 episodes are going to be a little rough. 104 episodes.
You say that, but like I remember early on when a couple of people were subscribing to Patreon and getting that content, they like, especially some that didn't really know as much about human factors, they found a lot of value just understanding the conferences and things that they would send people to, or they would like want to take their companies to. So even though there's like a little bit of samey in the beginning, I think over time it'll provide a lot of value. I'm excited for y'all to see how it performs and how people respond to it now being more public.
I absolutely think you're right. And in fact, we were encouraged by our patrons, like, hey, this is really informative. Like, public should see this. So it's not like we were like, let's take away value from our Patreon. In fact, that was a biggest thing for me, is like, I wanted to make it public, but at the same time, I wanted to have value for the patrons who support the show, because truly, like, I feel like we've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I want patrons to like get that. And they will. And the value proposition for Human Factors Minute will always continue to increase with our release schedule for the public, which I'm happy about. So, like, you know, someone decides in 2020, let's just say somebody decides in 2024 to subscribe to our Patreon, right? Like, let's say they subscribe in January 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they are listening to let's see here, 2024 would mean they are at episode like 41, and then they subscribe and they get access to 150 extra episodes. They're like 200 episodes that they'd get access to by becoming a patron, and that value proposition only increases over time because we're releasing 3 publicly for every 4 that we release on Patreon, again, as incentive for folks to come over there and support us. So it's a good deal, I think.
Value. Yeah.
That's impressive. So I realize I'm being really amateur by not switching off my email, because you just kind of hold the staff. There we go. I'm supposed to drop Teams as well. And I haven't put my new light on either. I bought a new light.
Another thing. Sorry. Blake reminded me of this too when he said that early on when we already got our first review for Human Factors Minute.
Really?
Yeah, I got a notification the other day that we got our first review, and it's by a patron, so it's like it makes sense that we'd actually have a review.
But still cool.
It's very cool. Where's now? I got to see the review. Okay, it says, I've been a Patreon of their main show for years, and they've always been consistent with the content and publishing schedule of Human Factors Minute. Highly recommended for any HF professional, but this was an especially helpful resource as a student. These episodes are informative, and I learned so much from listening to these.
Wow.
There we go.
And that's by PA user 8374759.
Excellent. That's much better than one of the reviews we've had in the past.
Two sophomoric bros.
Does that make the new T-shirt? But I think the old T-shirt sticks. So.
I need to buy that T-shirt.
I got a 2-star review on my podcast the other day. I was like, no, it's a review, but a 2-star. And I was because it was like, it's always been, I don't have that many reviews, but they're all 5-star, you know, like all 3 of them. And then he dropped down like 4.9 or something. I'm like, what's going on here? Somebody threw in a 2-star with no text, no nothing. Just I'm fairly sure it might be one of my kids, but yeah, I was just like, that's just what?
What platform?
Mine must be Apple, I think. But I think it might be Apple.
I wish they would always make you write text for those kind of things, because it's like sometimes you get slandered, but I'd rather somebody actually give me feedback or something than just like be able to be allowed to give me like half a star or something for anything I've done.
I had somebody from the States write me a very long email about why they were stopping listening to the podcast, my podcast, and I was like, but it was all really good for you, because basically what they were getting annoyed with, because it's when I was doing post-production for like put in the breaks and stuff rather than doing them dynamically. And so sometimes I put them in maybe just the wrong place, and my editing skills weren't as amazing as they are now, because the bar is low now. It was way lower then. So I was like, no, that's fair comment. They were like, oh, if you could like sort of do a bit more of that, and I was like, sorry about the back. I said, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We are trying, and this is a very amateur production. We're all learning, but I appreciate you taking the time to do that. They didn't respond. So, but I appreciate them putting the effort in. It's it gave me things I could work on.
Yeah.
That must have, that can be super useful for like, editing and all that kind of stuff. Because there was even somebody who reached out to us early on, Nick, that was like talking about sound or something, or sound quality.
Yeah.
And
Audio,
that, yeah. And that
audio engineer.
Yeah. And that rabbit hole to fix that stuff. But anyway.
I thought about going back and remastering some of our early episodes. I wonder what the value proposition would be, though. Maybe it's something that I do on Patreon. I don't know. I'd have to basically the remaster would be, okay, take out any content that's no longer relevant. That's not like a, discussion point. Like, we have answers to it now. It doesn't matter. Some of the speculative stuff in nature. But the human factors implications, or like good conversations around that, we keep. And then obviously touch up the audio to make those conversations sound. Basically do that, release them, because the first 20 something odd episodes of this were like lecture series in nature. That's what I've been calling them anyway, lecture series. And they're informative, especially for people finding the field. And I've thought about remastering those, and I'm going to do it because we have Human Factors Cast Academy now, and that can be some good low hanging fruit content that we can throw up there as pieces that y'all can enjoy.
There's two sides to that. One is, yes, for stuff like that, the lecture bits would be good, and actually some of my early stuff you might want to throw in there as well, because that's kind of my first 3 or 4 I think were what I consider, well, basically some of my lecture series stuff. But what a few people have said that they quite like is when they found my podcast, and I think I do it to others as well, is you listen to 1 or 2 of them, and like the live ones, the current ones, you're like, oh yeah, I'm into that, and then you go dive into the back catalogue and see where it came from, and then you see the journey of where like people have started doing podcasting for the first time, and how they've grown over time as a podcast. And I think that's quite a nice journey to see. So
yeah, to be clear, the remastered versions would go up on Patreon. Like, they wouldn't
be redoing all the old stuff. Yeah. So.
If I'm going to put in the effort, it's going to be for the people who support the show. Financially, I should say financially, because really everybody who listens and watches supports the show. Hey, we're live in 3 minutes. We're live now, but we're recording in 3. We're podcasting in 3 minutes. Y'all ready?
There it is. I mean, the real question is, are you recording the right mic in the right place?
I don't know. Does it sound right?
I don't know. Yeah, no, it sounds good.
Okay, good, because there's been some issues with that.
No, not once.
Yeah, there was one episode where geez, it sounded
yeah, one of those.
Yeah.
Could you hear me even when I was doing that?
No.
It was I think I did an entire one off my meeting mic rather than this mic, and wondered why it all sounded dead echoey and boomy. Well, actually, no, it sounded fine to me because this was going through my mixer.
Because you're talking through it,
yeah. And so it was like finding my ears, and Nick on the messaging going, "You basically sound really rubbish." I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I better set the equipment up right. And so. But we are professionals. It's all fine.
We are professionals. That is true.
Just not professional podcasters.
Well, speak for yourself.
Perfect.
What defines professional? Being paid to do it, I guess.
Oh,
basically.
Yeah. I guess.
We just enthusiastic amateurs.
I've been paid to I've been paid as a board operator before, if that counts.
Oh, okay. So you're professional then. I'm an enthusiastic amateur. That's my get out of jail free card for all my mess ups.
I mean, technically, the board operator position was a result of nepotism, but small detail.
It's how your parents give you pocket money.
No. I actually did the job. I did the work.
So,
but I got the position because of nepotism. Let me put it that way.
Well, that's how my entire business runs. I'm
yeah,
growing.
There you go. Exactly. See, it's
we're literally growing future employees. So
someday I'll hand off the podcast to my son. I was making jokes with my wife last night around him growing up someday and being like a lonely dude going, I'm gonna start a podcast.
Don't do it. Oh yeah, okay.
Man, on that note, we'll be right back when it starts the show.
Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for human factors, psychology, and design.
This is a very exciting episode for reasons that you'll find out about in just a minute if you're listening. This is episode 273. We're recording this live on February 9th, 2023. This is Human Factors Cast. I'm your host, Nick Roome, joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Hello, and great to be back here.
And back from wherever you've been, Mr. Blake Arnsdorff.
From the deep of the internet. How's everybody doing?
Hey, Blake. It's so great to have you back on the show. We got a great show for you all tonight. We're going to be talking about how roboticists want to give you a third arm. And later, we're going to answer some questions from the community about Human Factors and Ergonomics Conference and what that means for you, what happens in some stressful stakeholder meetings, and what happens if somebody schedules your sprint planning meeting for 5 a.m. We're going to talk about all that and more. But first, let's take about a couple of seconds here to talk about some programming notes. If you are listening to this, it's likely that you've seen in our podcast feed this week that our Human Factors Minute trailer is live now. It's out on March 1st, but you can listen to the episodes a day early if you subscribe to the feed. So for all of you, if you want to, there's a link in the description of this episode. You can go follow it over there. Human Factors Minute traditionally been a supporter-only show, but now we're making it freely available to the public, part of it anyway. And then coming up soon, Friday, February 24th, we have the first Human Factors and Ergonomics Society HFES Town Hall of the season. So that'll be a great time. Come and join us. Come with your questions. It'll be a good time. But Blake, I have to know, what have you been up to since the last time we talked? Welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me back on the show. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been almost a little over a year. But yeah, just kind of finding my way through what I want to do with my career and making different changes and moves, kind of moving a little bit more towards design and development from being a user experience researcher for a little while. But not a whole lot. It feels really good to be back here talking with y'all about human factors things. And I'm really excited just to do a little banter with you guys.
It feels great to have you all in one place. Barry, I have to know, what's the latest going on over at 1202?
So at 1202, we've still got the interview with Stephen Shorrock up there. And in that, he gives us an overview of his career with some really interesting and cool reflections on some of the things that he's got up to and what's kind of shaped and molded his career. And one of the most interesting things for me was where he turned around and said, rather than deliver a report, he wrote a letter to the management. And that was just phenomenal. I would never have the guts to do something like that, I don't think. Or maybe I would now that I've had the example. But we're also broadening our reach. So we've now got a dedicated TikTok, Instagram accounts, and we're trying to push some more content. So the shorts we're trying to get to be a bit more professional and a bit more dynamic. So we're putting more effort in the background. Basically, I'm learning how to do this editing stuff. So we've got some really exciting interviews coming up as well. So some of them are in all scheduled. 2 of them coming up in the next month. 2 of the most exciting ones I think I've done. Yeah, I was very excited about Stephen's interview being really good. These 2, I think, might even just be even that one step higher. I'm very, very excited.
Oh, I have to know. I have to know. You can type it in this like chat that we're all looking at, but no one else will know. All right. Well, thank you, Barry. Let's get into the part of the show everyone's here for. That's right. It's Human Factors News. Barry, what is the story this week?
So this week, roboticists want to give you a third arm. So what would you do with an extra limb? And before the social media melts down, please remember this is a family-friendly show. We've all seen them jobs that require an extra hand, from surgeons performing complex operations to braiding long hair. That's not to mention soldering wires or carpentry, trying to put together them fiddly joints. And that's just to consider supporting what we do now. What could you do better or differently, like Spider-Man's Dr. Octopus? Or what would a four-handed pianist be able to achieve? Or a gymnast with 4 arms? Such scenarios may seem like science fiction, but recent progress in robotics and neuroscience makes extra robotic limbs conceivable with today's technology. The research group at Imperial College London and the University of Friedberg in Germany, together with partners in European Project NEMA, are figuring out whether such augmentation could be realized in practice to extend human capabilities. The main questions the team is addressing include whether the human brain can control extra additional body parts, and what neural signals can be used to do so. The researchers believe that extra robotic limbs could be a new form of human augmentation, improving people's abilities and expanding what they can do with their bodies. The study differentiates 3 levels of human augmentation, with the 3rd level being the least mature technologically, but offering users an extra degree of freedom without taking away mobility from any other body part. The researchers are working on both invasive brain-machine interface implants and non-invasive methods to pick up brain signals, including EEG and EMG signals produced by muscles. So, Blake, the $1 million question here. What would you do with your third hand?
I think I'm most concerned about like walking through doors with a third arm and just getting stuck, not being able to move through it effectively. But like all kidding aside, this seems pretty insane. I love the idea of like music creation changing, especially like from the piano perspective, being able to like make pianos with 2 extra octaves or something like that. But when I started thinking about that particular concept, it's almost like a human evolution type of thing, where now you've introduced a completely new limb or completely new set of limbs. How does that change and augment our entire environment? How does it change your day-to-day life? How does it change jobs? There's just a lot of cool augmentation that can happen, and like productivity may skyrocket. Like people being able to do that third thing that they can't normally do. But ultimately for me, what I'm most stoked on is the neural communication part. Like, does that really provide a medium for doing different things, controlling things with your mind that we typically don't do, like computing or anything like that, outside of just like a third arm? But that's kind of my initial take on it. It's really cool. It seems really out there. But I'm really excited about the neuroscience behind it.
And I mean, like from the mental capacity, can we even handle that as humans? Can we handle knowing where a third arm is, right? To be clear, really quick, you were talking about, this is an audio medium, and just in case it was misunderstood, you were talking about people who play pianos earlier, right? Not the other thing. All right. So there might be just a little bit of outside influence that happened, by the way, with the selection of this story, Barry. But my first reaction to this story is, this would have been an amazing thing to have when my son was an infant, because there's just so many things that you need to do as a new parent that you just need an extra hand for, whether it's, you're holding baby and you need to, I don't know, get out a wipe or something, and you're like trying to one hand it and you're just relying on the weight of the wipes to like grab it from the container, and if you had a third hand to hold that thing down, or to actually grab the wipe with, and you could use your other hand to hold it down, or to change a diaper and hold other things while you're doing a diaper, or if you're even referencing how to do something as a new parent, you can hold your phone with a how-to thing right here, and it's just permanently mounted there, and you're like reading step by step, and you're navigating through it while your actual 2 hands are free. But beyond that, we'll talk about some of the mental capacity things with respect to how to actually control these things a little bit later. But that was just my initial thought, is like, how is this going to work? Barry, what are your initial thoughts on this?
I think I'm in the same boat as both of you. It's fantastic. The mind boggles. It's amazing. And where do you stop? If we can get an arm right, well, they're talking about like extra legs and extra fingers, and can you get an extra what more can you do, and what could the mind cope with in making this sort of stuff work? Because to get an arm working, surely then it's only if you conquered all the hurdles to get you there, it can't be much further to get you elsewhere. But on them serious point, I'm very much in with Blake here. I'm really interested in this control aspect. How do you make this, and this no pun intended, how do you make this truly hands free? Because normally when we have this sort of third arm, we see it with surgeons, don't we? And it's remote articulation, whereas this is what we're talking about is having that in something an extra useful capacity. So I'm really excited to dive into this discussion.
Before we do that, we had you've actually reached out on social media, Barry, to see what people in the community are saying. Do you want to read one of these, just in terms of another application that we could potentially use technology like this for?
Yeah,
really critical.
I did reach out massively, and that might have persuaded. I influenced maybe a little bit where the subject came from tonight, but I wanted to highlight a comment by Rob Hutton, who's a lecturer here in the UK, and he commented on LinkedIn that a really high tech and critical use of this, something that we all struggle from, is when you've got that itch in the middle of your back, it would just be able to get it for you. I mean. That, to be honest, that was one of my first thoughts as well when it was there. When he said there, going, if you got an itch on your back, I mean, who wouldn't spend the billions of pounds that it's going to take to develop this technology to have a back scratcher?
Yeah, I mean, it can bend in ways that your regular arms can't, and so that's got to be worth something, right? Let's talk about. I mean, we could go anywhere with this, honestly, and I think we're kind of all in the same boat of wanting to know how this neural connection works, right? So let's talk about how you control this thing, or at least a little bit more about how you might control this thing. So from what I understand, there's two different ways in which you could, right? You could look at either a traditional brain computer interface where it is interfacing with your brain, the invasive technology, right? So that might be one way that you're looking at. It's kind of the physical control, neural signals going in and controlling these things. There's also non-invasive technology that can be used. Things like EEG and signals from your brain that are just passively controlling that. Not passively, you're actively controlling it based on what signals work, what signals don't. But those are the two ways in which we can control this thing. I don't know, Blake, what are your thoughts on control of this thing?
I feel like the of course, the business answer is how do we make this accessible to a lot of people? So giving some kind of wearable that allows you to measure EEG or any signals coming off your body could be amazing. But I think what ends up being the interesting problem is the degrees of freedom you get from the two different modes of being able to control something. So I'd say the application would have a lot of impact on how you're going to want to control something like this. Because one thing that I didn't even think about till I was listening to y'all talk is there's a giant thing here for prosthetics. So replacing limbs that used to exist and then leveraging, existing neuronal connections for that. So in that case, maybe you want something a little more invasive, so because it's acting as a limb depending on how the tech works, versus having a third arm at your job. Going back to the surgery example from earlier, using a wearable could just make it so you're only using it at work, taking on and off and all that kind of stuff. So I think the control mechanism is really an interesting thing here, and how you can actually what can we get away with the least invasive technology, and then how do we superpower that by being a little more invasive?
Yeah, I mean, that's you've fired a whole bunch of thought there, because you're right. If you take that prosthetic approach, that's where they're adapting already existing signals, already existing movements, and transplanting them into the technology. And that just shows the magnitude of the task. The fact that not only are we going to have to create a control interface, but we're going to have to do it in a way that the brain can control it, and it's got to be able to control it. I mean, one of the biggest issues we're going to have here is latency. It's got to, as soon as however you imagine that work is done, it's got to be done, hasn't it? You don't sit there and say, lift my arm, and then, your arm lifts 2 minutes later. It has to be controlled. So how do we make sure that latency goes down, which then leads you back down to, well, I can't see how it wouldn't be an invasive control. because every other non-invasive control I've seen has been an interpretation. You have to think in a certain way. You're trying to create a brain form, aren't you, rather than thinking, right, I need to grab this. It's got to almost be that goal-oriented thing. I want this to happen, not I must lift the arm and make it articulate in some way. So I keep on going back to the Matrix. Are we literally going to have that sort of almost plug-in? I mean, okay, maybe not quite as invasive as the Matrix one, but some sort of plug-in to make that happen. And then almost that then takes you to the other point you made, Blake, is if this is something that you wear for work, would you A, want to take it off? And B, how would you take it off? And what is the risk involved in suddenly thinking, oh, I've dropped something. I've got, if you've got that third arm, but the third arm isn't there anymore because you're just taking it off because you're at home and you don't catch that cup of tea, which you thought you'd be able to, or whatever it is, there is probably a massive safety case there around having limbs and not having limbs purely down to how you're controlling them. Not so much because of the having them there itself, but because you've got to be able to distinguish between I have it or I don't. I think there's a lot of stuff there which I think could be really fascinating.
You're going down the safety rabbit hole, and I mean, there's a ton of other safety concerns.
I didn't want to, but
I mean, there's a ton of other safety concerns. Not only am I thinking about, do I have this thing on or not, because I've only put it on for work, but I mean, even having this thing on, if it pinches a body part because you've operated it in a way that's not the way that you wanted it to, and it's behaved in a way that you haven't wanted it to. There's all these considerations from that perspective. But then what about some of the long lasting impacts of, wearing this thing in a place that humans haven't evolved traditionally to accommodate? So if you're wearing this big, heavy thing on your backpack, is the weight distributed properly to allow your body to accommodate for that? Are you going to have some long lasting health effects with respect to, the way that you move and things like that from having these extra robotic limbs off of your body? Beyond the physical component, is there going to be, like I mentioned earlier, enough mental capacity for us to actually operate these in a safe way on the job? If it's something that we've implanted into our infants at birth, where they have this control mechanism and we put little tiny baby robot arms on them and they can learn to use those like their normal limbs as they've grown up, then I think we're capable of doing that and understanding what is possible with this third arm capability. It allows us to move and operate in different ways. But if we don't have that training or experience growing up with this third limb, what does that actually look like in an operational environment? Is it going to be safe and reliable for those who are inexperienced with it, as well as those who are experienced with it? And is it going to basically be durable in cases where, I don't know, maybe you're operating dangerous machinery with it? And is it going to pull you into that dangerous machinery? Is there going to be some quick release mechanism that if you get it caught in something, it's going to quickly come off, and then what does that do for you? Obviously you won't feel pain, hopefully not, but what does that feel like to then try to perform a task and not have that thing there? I just have so many questions.
Well, again, I mean, that whole feeling thing, I mean, we sort of, with the remote limb application, we tend to wear haptics, don't we? So when it pressures something, you get the pressure on your own hand, so you kind of know where you're at. That just doesn't apply because it's a third limb. And the more you sort of go down this rabbit hole, it's quite amazing. The other thing you sort of mentioned the safety bit around if it pinches your body, what happens if it pinches somebody else's? And how do you get that feedback? And how, if you grip somebody else too hard or something like that as well, that's not good.
That's an ethical consideration there.
Well, I mean, it would be just providing you feedback, right? Like I could see that, like, even in the case of if we replace somebody's leg, like being able to provide, actuation back to you that you've stepped on something. But you don't really want to be hurting people either. And so that does seem pretty dangerous in some ways. But I don't know about y'all, this really, again, with a lot of this technology, it seems like very stepping stone like. Like I don't see third arms being the end here. I would actually see this is more focused on the being able to control a lot of autonomous things in your environment through whatever kind of neuro haptics that are going on. So like take all the limbs off of you eventually, and you're controlling machines in an entire warehouse or something to that effect.
Yeah, and that really does open up the human computer or the brain computer interaction in all this. Again, my questions are mostly around capacity for humans to understand what they're doing in a situation where you're plugging into an entire system, right? Do you have the brain capacity to manage an entire system of various machinery to perform a task? And where do we limit that scope of control? Because that scope of control is going to be really important for just our ability to do something. Like okay, I'm going to bring it back to the arms really quick. Imagine you have 2 extra arms on your back and you're playing a piano. Okay. It's for me, even having some experience, it's hard enough to play with 2 hands, to really practice at it. For some people they're savants and sure, whatever. But, for others, it's just enough to try to get your hands to work in coordination. Now add 2 more to that, and the complexity doesn't double, it quadruples, or, it's some sort of exponential thing by adding in 2 more things to control. Because playing a piano is exactly like this already. You can start with 1 hand and play a tune. Then you can add in your second hand and play, the accompaniment. And then you add in your foot with sustain pedals. And so you're now controlling 3 different things that control different aspects of the piano. If you add in 2 more limbs that are doing different things, I guess I'm kind of convincing myself that it's possible, but it's a lot to think about.
So the flip argument I give to that is you've got, rather than think of a piano, think of an organ, like a church organ or something like, which has got, some of the big ones have got like 4 keyboards. And so that means you could be playing, and literally you have to choose which ones you're going to play. You could be playing all 4. And that would produce such a different type of music at that point. But yes, I mean, it's just that I think once you work out how you are going to control one, because it's a constant refrain, isn't it, that actually the brain is underutilized massively. It's got loads of capacity and stuff. We just don't really truly understand, and we're evolving to do it. The digital natives of today could control way more digitally than digital immigrants and older generations, because it's an evolutionary thing. So no matter what happens now, it might seem quite fantastic now. In 10 years' time, I'm thinking 10, 15 years' time, this is going to be completely normal. And we're going to have evolved to use it. I mean, look at a basic gaming controller. There's so many more functions on there that people can easily adapt to. Younger generations easily adapt to now. I struggle to use them all because I'm of that slightly older generation. So, these things evolve. So I think once they come in, as you said, I think this is a stepping stone. This is, it's always the first to market type of thing. How are we going to use it? How are we going to make the most of it? But it is still really exciting. I mean, actually, for your piano thing, it wouldn't necessarily be another hand on the keyboard. It would be the thing to turn the page of your music.
Yeah. And I want to comment on 2 things. One, the video game controllers thing. Okay, I was gonna give my son like Super Mario, jump left and right, and that's basically all I have, with some throwing in there too. He's like fully playing Hot Wheels games where you're not only maneuvering the car left and right on the track, you're going forward, you're going backwards, you're doing drifts. He's doing drifts and he's 3 years old. He's also, okay, not only that, but that you can use the secondary stick, the right stick, to maneuver your vehicle in midair for jumps where you're like going off a ramp and then you have to turn the car upside down to land on a magnetic track. He's doing all that at 3. And I'm like, I was going to give this kid Mario to start with, and he's like, just, it's really
way beyond that already.
Yeah. The second piece, I don't remember what my comment was. I'll get back to it.
I'm sure it was amazing. What do you think about to pick a point that Blake made earlier around it being, widely available, something that's going to be widely available? I mean, there's got to be massive social implications for this, because if this appears at your local technology store, it's not going to be cheap, is it? So, I mean, there's got to be, what are the social impacts of this? If you've got this 3rd arm, 4th arm, whatever it is, an extra foot and you can run quicker or whatever it is, does that mean that, is it just a toy? Or is it going to give you more capacity and capability? It's going to make you more employable because you bought it, and therefore it becomes basically a differentiator because you can afford to buy a funky gadget.
Well, that's almost what I was thinking. Like, for certain jobs, do you now have to be certified to use this device in a workplace setting? How does that change, like the education system or job onboarding? And there seems like there's a giant, design chasm there of onboarding somebody to how to use one of these devices for a job, especially if we're talking about these things that are a little bit more serious, like being a surgeon, working in construction, putting together automobiles versus like being in your own home and being able to use it. So I would imagine it kind of changes a lot of things from the employment perspective, which I know that's like a giant, thing that people are already dealing with the AI perspective on that.
I remember what it was. I was going to jump in with a joke about one-man bands complaining that their jobs are being taken now by robotic arms. But along the same line of job requirements, right? This opens up a whole additional aspect of jobs because, well, it opens up new jobs to begin with because you have to have technicians and engineers to maintain and repair these robotic arms, these robotic limbs. You also have to have, updated skills, like you were saying, Blake. Like you have to upgrade these skills to operate these robotic limbs. And so, is there some sort of certification that says I can use one of these on the job? And then there's also opportunities for development and manufacture of these limbs, obviously. But then, what happens if you get those jobs that are automated by basically recording someone's input, putting a robotic limb and just repeating that input, right? Like recording macros and having an arm do those jobs. Do we need people to do those jobs anymore if we just have a power source and somebody's initial input making that thing happen? I don't know. It opens up a lot of questions from job requirements perspective. What is going to be required for jobs? And it's the same question I have around AI too, right? We've seen a lot of different tools coming out recently, ChatGPT and Google's Bard now coming out too, many other competitors as well to AI. And it's going to be a training thing. Can we get enough people to understand what these tools, AI and robotic arms included, can be used for and are used effectively for? And is it, like you were saying, is it going to be one of those things that is going to be limited to access to those who have money? And it's going to make that divide even further, right? Because like AI is an easy one to point to right now. To be able to afford an AI, ChatGPT is free right now, but they're going to start charging for it. And so if you're not able to use that, you're immediately put at a disadvantage. It's like not only owning a calculator if you're trying to do work in math. And so are you going to be lesser, quote unquote, at your job because you can't afford these things? There's a lot of questions. I don't know. I've just opened up a can of words here.
Well, it is. I mean, it's one of these things, isn't it? I think the evolution of technology always changes jobs. No matter what happens. And I think the way that you mentioned it earlier, there's going to be a whole bunch of new jobs open up with this. There's going to be maintenance. There's going to be, what new roles does it open up by the fact that you've got the ability to have this, extra arms, etc., etc. There's so many science fiction movies out there where, you've got extra limbs. It's almost a par for course in this sort of stuff, and it just naturally happens. So with all the things that have evolved, and it's been doing it for like literally hundreds of years, some jobs will close down. Some, you will need less people doing mandrolic work. Manual labor will become less intensive because one person can do so much more. But then your ChatGPT example, I think, is quite good. It's open source at the moment. Google's piece will become open source or relatively cheap and accessible. So that makes, we've seen it on this show that we can have that extra capability because of the use of AI. And it hasn't stopped us from doing, it hasn't taken us out of job. It's allowed us to do more, not less. And I kind of think that this sort of technology will go down that route because employers will see that this allows more capability. So they'll, it's a bit like, a pilot doesn't buy their own, well, some do buy their own airplane, but an airline pilot doesn't buy their own airplane. The employer buys the airplane, the pilots learn how to fly them. And so this could be a similar type of thing. But bringing it right back to design and development, the other thing that I was thinking about is what does the aesthetic of this look like? Because does it look like a hand? So is it like a fake skinned hand? Is it a more mechanical looking, like almost gears and almost steampunk? Yeah, that type of thing. That's really weird. But for those audio listening, Nick's got random hands coming out of random parts of his body. But yeah, so is it something that's going to look a bit more mechatronic, or is it something that's got to look a bit? Has it got to look like a skin arm? Blake, what do you think?
Well, I was wondering about that too, because like if anybody like takes a look at the article that's linked, like they show a example where somebody's like replacing a space station or fixing something on a space station, and it looks very mechanical looking.
Mhm.
However, like when we're talking about leveraging, neuronal capacity and thinking about like, well, what's going to be easier for somebody to understand how a machine works, or using something that looks like their own hand or their own arm. So from my perspective, maybe the arm is the way to go, just because it could potentially give you a better point of reference for when you start thinking about how this thing works or what it can do, that we're not really stuck in that, like, okay, I need this extra limb to do this action for me. It's as simple as like, pick that up or give me that thing off the shelf. But Nick, what do you think? How would you have this designed?
So I've thought about this a little bit because I'm not super happy with the illustration on the original article. And I mean, there's they do kind of have this back to further expand on your point. They have a backpack with two arms sticking out of it that are kind of right behind your arms, and they're kind of rotated. They're robotic in nature. I don't know. I think the easiest thing to operate would probably be an analog close to what we have, and that's just my initial thought, right? And an analog to our arm connected at our shoulder joint, and basically the only thing that might be different in the case of implementing some of these like robotic arms, you have I don't know, you have AI systems on board, whatever thing is on you that is going to allow for the interpretation of your input. So there's some sort of third mechanism in the form of an artificial intelligence that is interpreting your input and producing the output into robot arm speak. So that way it programs a place for it to go and do all that. And all this has to happen really quickly. So that way, if you do have those thoughts of like, pick that thing up, it's got to deconflict between what your intent is with your arms, with your custom fleshy bits, versus the robotic bits. Are your fleshy bits going to do that? Or your robotic bits going to do that? How does it deconflict those things? What's going on? Which one is going to take this one? I'm doing this with my fleshy bits and doing that with my robotic bits. And how does all that work? So there's got to be automated systems on board. But the way I'm thinking about this to begin with, I'm imagining this technology being used very, conservatively, and maybe almost like we see it in this illustration, where it's some sort of exosuit or exoskeleton that allows us to offset that weight and help us in environments in which case we have to do complex tasks where we hold multiple objects and items. And they might just be a pair of helping hands to begin with, and then we advance that relationship with the way in which we interact with the robotic bits later on. But I think that's the evolution for me, is you tack these onto an exoskeleton, exosuit with, the non-invasive brain reading to start. And then the evolution is something down the line where we have multiple limbs and, we just change out our pairs of arms. Like, what does that mean culturally? I don't know. That's something else that I want to get to before we wrap up here. But speaking of wrapping up, let's do one more round of thoughts and then we'll get out of here. Barry, what are your kind of closing thoughts on the arm stuff?
So I'm loving the depth of science that we have fleshy bits and robotic bits. I think the terminology is just on point. I think there's two bits that I've got
all
around
fleshy and robotic. We got it.
Yeah. there's a lot of videos around at the moment where they do the experiment where you have the fake hand and the real hand, and hit the fake hand with the hammer, and the real hand thinks it's got it's getting the reception of that. So that's one thing I think our brains will be easily confused without really good training. The other bit, I don't know whether you get it out in the States, but hopefully people get it. If anybody's watched Inspector Gadget.
Oh yeah,
good. That's okay. No, good cultural reference. Is this just going to end up like that, where basically it's like go get your hands, or go, and as you sort of said, the development of that is the hands go away, and it's just the tool that you're trying to use. So if you're a mechanic, it's like the drill. It's how you operate the drill from that point. It's how you operate the container for holding the bolts, that type of thing. So yes, I think as we said right at the top, this is the start of something I think going to be quite impressive.
Blake, what about you? What are your final thoughts on this?
I think the third arm thing, like I said a couple times, is like a starting place. And really where I'm excited or interested in is how does this allow, because Nick, you brought up a really good point. Like, what if we gave this to kids? What if we gave this to kids and it starts really expanding their capability to use their brain more than we're able to do now, or give it to adults that now are able to like expand and use more neurons in their brain than they've ever used before? How does that change how people think? How does it change how people interact with the world around them or interface with each other, technology? So I really am excited to see how does this impact our brains? Because really that's the underlying science here, is like what's going on with the neuroscience. And as neuroplastic as the brain can be, it would be insane if we could use 2% more of our brain and see what comes from it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more of the like society, cultural norms type of questions that I want to. This is the part where I open up just a bunch of can of worms where we don't address it because we're going to go to a commercial here in a second. But basically, like some of the classic cyberpunk questions: do you modify yourself? Do you modify your body with these bits? Right? Do you like integrate this technology? Do you integrate with the technology? Do you get the technology to be able to jack into a BCI? Basically there's obviously all these privacy concerns. Can you get hacked? Can you whatever? But there's also disparities with respect to access to this stuff from socioeconomical status, classic cyberpunk stuff. But also, what does this mean in terms of being able to use these limbs for malicious purposes? Is it going to superpower criminals? We don't know. And then lastly, what does this do from a cultural norms perspective and values? Does this change how people view other people who use this stuff? Am I going to think lesser of you because you use 2 robotic arms? Are you going to think lesser of me because I use 2 robotic arms and I've chosen to do so because it augments the way that I think and augments the way that I interact with the world? So that's it. Thank you to our patrons and everybody else who voted on the story this week. And thank you to Barry for his influence on the story this week. Thank you to our friends over at IEEE Spectrum for our news story. If you want to follow along, we do post the links to the original articles on our weekly roundups in our blog. So you can also join us in our Discord for more discussion on these stories and much more. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back to see what's going on in the Human Factors community right after this.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our weekly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Minute, a Patreon-only weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yeah, we'll need to change that once Human Factors Minute goes live. But huge thank you to, as always, to all of our patrons. We especially want to thank our Human Factors Cast All Access patrons, Michelle Tripp. Let's talk about Human Factors Minute for a second. I brought it up at the top, but again, it's going to be live. It's going to be public for public consumption on March 1st, early if you subscribe to the feed. But total right now, currently for our patrons, we have 166 episodes out there. That'll be on a slow drip for all of you listening to it publicly. But the total time, we have 3.5 hours just about of Human Factors Minutes out there in the world. 3 hours, 29 minutes, and 6 seconds. Average playtime is at 1 minute and 15 seconds. So you're actually getting a little bit more than a minute in each Human Factors Minute. I'm really excited for you all to experience this. This has been a long labor of love. Blake and I started it back in 2019 or something. And since then, there's been a lot more voices and people involved in the project than just Blake and myself. In fact, we brought Barry on a little bit into the production of that. So that way he's a voice and talent on the show as well. Beyond that, there's many people that work in our lab as volunteers who author these Human Factors Minutes. They go out, they do the research, they bring all that stuff together and combine it into one topic that we bring to you in 1 minute every week. So I'm super excited for this thing to go live. I just cannot wait for you all to get it into your ear holes from all the hard work that we've all put into this. So with that, let's get into the next part of the show we like to call.
It came from.
I see Blake's laughing because I've never changed the visual, even though I complained about it
Forever.
Anyway, let's get into It Came From. This is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you topics the community is talking about. If you find any of these answers useful, give us a like to help other people find this content. It really mean a lot to us if you did that. All right. This first one here is from the Human Factor subreddit. This is Correct Bull 8862. Let's see here. They write HFES conference. Is this a good place? Oh, sorry. HFES conference / HFES healthcare. Is this a good place to network and line up internships and jobs? I feel like this is what are they? It's like a softball. So, Barry, what do you think?
Yes. Yeah. It absolutely is. The only thing I would say, though, and it's something I've learned the hard way, you need to put the effort in, you need to put the work in to make sure that you know who you're going to go and talk to, that you actually go and do it. I've done it before. You go to conferences and go, I'm going to go talk to all these people, and then you get nervous, imposter syndrome, whatever it is that comes into play, and you decide to go and hide in the corner or do what I do, go and find the corner of the bar and drink red wine. If you want to go and talk to people, work out who's going to be there, make your list, make sure, get your top 10 of people you want to go and talk to and go and do it. So make your network plan. You can't, if you're going to make the most of it, you can't just rock up and hope it all happens.
Hey, Barry, quick follow-up on that. Not everybody has a podcast where they can say, hey, do you want to be on my podcast and talk there? How do you do that?
I don't know. That's why I started a podcast, so I could absolutely make it to start on a pro. I mean, it's one of these things. It's actually going to be the topic of my opening conference speech this year. Is about communications, about welcoming people in, because we go. I mean, I remember going to one of my first ergonomics conferences, sat with a bunch of friends, a bit younger than I am now, going, "Oh, look, you've got the really important people giving speeches up on the top. I could never hope to speak." And they're daring to ask a question of that expert on the stage and asking difficult questions. Whereas now I'm the difficult person asking the questions or, giving the presentations. And you sort of forget what it's like to be the person down in the audience thinking that they dare not go and talk to somebody because they think they're too big and important. So I'm going to try and put the challenge out there to make sure you can go and talk to all these people, but also on the presenters on us to make sure that we are open to be spoken to. So, but small talk. I mean, how do you do small talk? Or as you do it, don't bother and just go and say hi. Most people are more welcoming than you give them credit for, and if they're not, well, quite frankly, they don't deserve to know you.
I couldn't have said anything better myself. That's really, really great advice.
Blake, what about you?
So I think we're all going to agree here. So I'm going to try and take a perspective on how you can approach this and get the gold mine that it is out of it. I think Barry made a great point of knowing who you're going to go talk to. One approach I've taken before is reaching out to people before I go to a conference and asking about things they're going to talk about if like the presentation roster's up, or like also like knowing who of my friends or who of my network group is going, so that I feel like I have a buddy that I can go talk to and, always be in a group of people. The other thing to look out for is like, are there events that are specifically geared towards going and interacting with people? Are there like interactive workshops? Are there happy hours? Are there like opening speeches or dinners or whatever? Because that can be a great place to, like, day one, go meet a bunch of people and, try and, make a friend the first day. The other thing that I think is super valuable about conferences that I see in most are the, mock interviews or like job fair type things that they have. Those can be super useful because like there's less barrier to entry of like, oh, I don't know this person, I'm nervous to talk to them, they're a rock star in UX or human factors or whatever. This is more of like, go get the reps in of interviewing, and maybe something works, maybe something doesn't, but you'll learn a lot in the process.
Yeah. Geez, guys, you like taking all the good stuff. Basically, yes, these are great to go to. And I'd highly recommend anyone go to these in person, just because going in person, beyond the whole planning who you want to talk to and reaching out to people beforehand, you also have the opposite end of interactions that you weren't expecting. You run into people who you're like, hey, I didn't know you were working on this thing. And you have those discussions in the hallway. After a presentation, you go to these discussion panels and somebody brings up a really good point that you didn't think about. And then it sparks an idea, you spark collaboration between, and it's just like these ideas are just flying at conferences. And like Barry was saying, it can be intimidating to like, brainstorm with somebody else who may know more than you. And it's okay to be humbled in that way and say, oh, I just didn't know about that. That's great that you've already researched that thing that I just came up with. But also, it's like that might spawn further additional ideation and collaboration between you and another person. And it's also possible that you might be working on something totally distant from the topic being talked about, but have a way in which that topic can be applied to what you're working on, or vice versa. And that's another form of collaboration that you can do. And so it's just like, yes, there's everything. Just go. And the healthcare symposium is coming up soon. In fact, we'll have some coverage. Not sure what exactly yet, but we will have some coverage this year. So that's great. Yeah, I don't know. That's all for this question. Let's get into the next one here. This one's stressful stakeholder meeting this Friday by Jammers9787 on the UX Research subreddit. They write, I have a meeting coming up about research processes and templates I've been using. General research ops rather than specifics of all the studies being run. This individual I'll be presenting to is known for being blunt, cold, and very critical. I've seen them during other presentations, and they essentially cross-examine people and everyone leaves the meeting feeling worse than they came in. Does anyone have any tips on how to manage stakeholders like this? Barry, you know anyone like this?
I don't know what you're talking. So, right, I'll give you some advice, and I advise you not to take it. So, right, the one way is just take it. If you know what they're like, you know it's going to be, you know it's not personal, just let it wash over you, and it's their problem, not yours. Unfortunately, I can't take that advice because I don't like letting people to get away with that. I see no reason at all why anybody should be allowed to get away with being, insert expletive at that point, towards you when you're just trying to do your job. So I have two approaches to it, really. One of them, I call it out. And suggests that not in a nasty way, not anything like that, but along the lines of, I don't think necessarily we need to be that argumentative, that defense, whatever it is that they're being. We can maybe counter things in a slightly friendlier manner, whatever. The other one I quite like doing, and it depends how much I want the job to continue and whatever, but I just go reflective. If they're being blunt, cold, and critical, then I'll just reflect it back at them. And sometimes it's a good way of I think 50-50. If you're doing that, some people will actually take that and go, oh, I see what they're doing. Is that what I'm doing? Oh, right, okay. Or they'll just get really sort of, how dare you be like that with me? And then somebody else will point out, it's just like two of the same people in the room. So The problem with doing that is if with any of them approaches, you kind of got to be vaguely confident in your position, because otherwise it's not necessarily good for employment longevity. Particularly if they're senior, I've seen it unfortunately go wrong for myself on a couple of occasions. But fundamentally, I don't believe it should happen, and I wish everybody felt empowered to call it out. It's not always like that. You can't always do it, but you should be able to, I would like to think. So how do you guys keep hold of your jobs as opposed to do it the way that I do it?
I agree with you, Barry. I think that it's a rock and a hard place, especially like if you in the US, or I guess globally, if you look at the economy, like it's hard to say some of these things. Like you should feel like you're empowered to call this kind of stuff out at work, because it's probably not a place that you want to be working if that's not addressed by somebody else. And like you've got a group of peers that are just letting a toxic individual at a senior level make people feel this way. However, I do think there are a couple things to like take a step back and look at. From my like time being a designer and a very short stint of trying to be a stand-up comedian, I have a really thick skin. And I think it's an important thing to have if you're in the UX design community, or like even if you're a researcher too, because you have to present hard points sometimes. It can be really difficult with different stakeholders. So one thing to try and do is separate it from taking it personally. If you know this person is going to act this way, do your best to look for actual objective feedback that you can use and be questioning about it. Like make sure that you can actually walk away with something. One interesting case that I had, because I'm not great at being super combative in group settings, but I will always go up to somebody afterwards and try and have a discussion of what just happened to that room. And I've found more often than not, some people don't know that that's the way they're coming off, and that's the way they're making people feel. So if you like can bring it up in yourself to go talk to whoever after the meeting and get a better sense of, do they really understand what they're doing to people? I'll give you forewarning. This can backfire too, and just be an entirely worse conversation and make you feel even worse. And to Barry's point, you may lose your job because you lose your temper. But it's just like, try to take it with stride and like give the person the benefit of the doubt, even if they don't deserve it. And just kind of like see what you can do from taking it as a learning experience, having a conversation, a growth opportunity for you both. But that's definitely an easier said than done type of tactic.
Yeah, you guys again took my answers. This is the downfall of going last, but I've never dealt with anyone like this before. Sounds like a totally unique experience that I have no idea how to answer this question. With this type of personality, I think there's my advice would be to be diplomatic about it. Try to take the high ground. If you do call them out, be diplomatic about it, right? Don't let them know, but be professional, right? There's the other piece of like understanding where they're coming from. And they likely have similar goals to you to make the product, process, procedure, whatever it is that you're working on better. That should be a universal goal shared between you two. And so they're coming at this from likely a place of trying to make that thing better. And they're just trying to add value, even if they come off as abrasive. And so, either take what they say to heart or don't. That's, I think, where they're coming from. And yes, there's a lot to be said about delivery, especially from three people on a podcast, because we all understand the importance of communication. Not everybody does. And it's a really tough place to be when you're encountering that combative, sometimes personality. So, just they are, and that's one strategy, right? Call them out and say, hey, look, I know we have the same goals, and then question them on their beliefs. So why did you say that? Why do you believe that to be true? And that will often cause them to introspect and change their ways, totally, entirely. And that's sarcasm too, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like Barry said, 50-50. All right, let's get into this last one. The company moves sprint planning to 5 a.m. suddenly. This is by Easygoing Spyros on the user experience subreddit. Told myself I would never die on this, or I would die on this hill and not go. 5 a.m. is ridiculous, but I don't have a job lined up to leave yet. Any advice for what to do, or am I the one overreacting? Barry, what do you think about 5 a.m. stand-up meeting?
Nope. That's not well. No, I'll qualify that. Right. So my general answer is: if the sprint and the project is ongoing, so it's that's the way your company works, and what they're trying to do is to pull you back to a 5 a.m. start time, which isn't a 5 a.m. start time; it's a 4:30 start time. Because by the time you get yourself sorted out, you prepped for if you're doing it properly, you need to do your prep. You need to know what you're doing, what you're contributing, etc., etc. So when are you going to bed? 5 o'clock is ridiculous. So I sort of have where I've worked in the past core hours. I like to get in at 5 o'clock in the morning occasionally, because that's my quiet time. Between 5 to 6 o'clock when I get in, if I've gone into my other office, it's like sort of 7. But I try to encourage the rest of my team not to get in until like at the earliest 7:30, 8 o'clock, because I've got time then to prep my day and without any interruptions, and then I can work at managing everybody else and do all that sort of stuff. I think it's unreasonable to have meetings outside of, say, 8 or 9 to 5, because everybody works some sort of flexible hours. That's when people are going to be in. That's when you should be scheduling meetings for. The one exception I would say, because I've seen it and done this before, if you've got a short-term goal, something that you need to achieve that is time-bounded, nothing more than a week, or maybe a fortnight at a push. I've ran projects where I've had everybody in at 5 o'clock, early days, and you've worked long days. But that was for very specific reasons, very time bounded, to meet a critical deadline that was not my fault. But it was, we were talking like very, very important stuff to hit. So at that point, yes, you can do it and do that. And you then commence, you reward the staff at the end of it. You're buying them early morning breakfast at the job. You're taking them out to for beverages after the sprint's finished, and you're heavily rewarding them for saying, you did a great job, thank you very much. Short time bounded, emergency exercises only. But no, if you start to do that to me, then we wouldn't be working together very long. Blake, what do you? Are you a 5 o'clock man? Could you nail that?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me in some ways. But ultimately, if it's like you don't want to get up at 5 a.m. for the job that you have, go find another job. Like, if it's just not that interesting, it doesn't get you that excited that that's something you want to do, awesome. Does it sound unreasonable? Probably, unless there's like some need to work with an international client, and that's kind of what you maybe didn't sign up for when you started, or like teams in different time zones that someone when it works and overlaps very well, great. But on the other end of it, like I've had jobs in the past where I was fine with being like at work at 4:30 or being ready to go at 5 a.m. for various meetings that I couldn't have otherwise, that it was just an interesting project or like piece of tech that I was working on. But it definitely feels unreasonable here, especially if this was not an expectation set like on your onboarding. There's not a great reason. It's hard to tell from like a really small Reddit post like why this is done. But I don't know, if you feel like you don't want to do that, then you're not overreacting. It just may not be the job for you. But I don't know, Nick, would you want to like have sprint planning at 5 a.m.?
Maybe. I mean, look, here's the thing. I'm going to take kind of the opposite perspective here. You do what's best for the team. And while I wouldn't like to do a 5 a.m. meeting, nor would I like to do a 10 p.m. meeting. I do those because I work with folks in India. And I want to make things convenient for them when I meet with them. And so there's instances in which you are the odd person out. If I were to work with somebody in the UK and they were to meet at my 8 a.m., their day's over. Like, their day's already over by the time I've come around and woken up. So it's like, do I wake up early and work on their time frame so that way we can all communicate on a daily sprint? Or do I complain about it and say, no, we're going to meet at your 2 p.m. So that way I can, is that right? Did I do that conversion right? Where I'm going to meet at a later time, your time. So that way I can, sleep in a little bit. So I'm of two minds of this. Did you sign up for this? And is this expected that you're going to be working with a distributed team? If so, then I think that's fair that they're setting it at 5 a.m. Is most of the team okay with that? But do what's best for your team. If you can find a happy medium where you're meeting not at 5, but maybe 7, and it's still early enough for them to actually get stuff done during the day, you have to look at the team dynamics too. So that's where I'm at. I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable. I just think this post is lacking context. I just wanted to get initial thoughts there. All right, last part of the show. One more thing. No, it needs no introduction, but Blake, since it's been a while, what's your one more thing this week?
I'm cheating, so it was really awesome to be back on the podcast. But it was also awesome to get to meet Barry in like a more fun context than just like in a meeting. So this was great. The other thing that I'm really excited about, and I haven't been excited about something, career-wise in a long time, is I'm working on developing like educational material around accessibility and UX. And so I'm really focused on how do I create stuff that allows, people that are transitioning careers or even career professionals to learn about how to build, AX practices into the products they design, the software they develop, and all that kind of good stuff. So that's something I'm really excited about right now. But Barry, one more thing.
Well, I got to meet you. I mean, I've kept your seat warm now for over 12 months, and it's great to actually interact. So that's awesome. The other thing I'm starting to do now is with my sort of, I'm starting to get invites to give talks on human factors by sort of almost random organizations and random people, which is amazing. They've sort of seen it on my LinkedIn that I'm going to become president, this, that, and the other, and they want me to do it. But I'm finding actually that's really difficult. We struggle to define things like human factors within our own community. To doing it for like school children and all this sort of stuff, that I can see this being quite a challenging year, but I'm equally excited. So I might be a repetitive thing might be on post shows to come. Is right. I'm going to be giving a talk to these people. How do I get these people excited? And I'll expect the audience and everybody to people who are listening to help me get out of this hole that I've dug for myself. Nick, what about yourself? What's your one more thing?
That is some perfect post show content there. I'm cheating here, but I got to be on a podcast with both of you together, so that's really awesome. Also, I've been working a lot this week, and I don't know if you've ever done this where you fit a whole week into a day, a whole week's worth of work into a single day. But I've done that several times this week, and it's a lot, and I'm happy to decompress and have an outlet to decompress. And this is just a reminder for everyone listening to go hydrate and give yourself some me time. That's all. And that's it for today, everyone. If you like this episode and enjoy some of the discussion about what you could do with a third arm that's PG friendly, I'll go encourage you to go listen to episode 262, where we talked about robotic boots that you could slip on over your little slippers or your Crocs. Comment wherever you're listening with what you think of the story this week for more in-depth discussion. You can always join us on our Discord community. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. Of course, you can always go and subscribe to our latest podcast, Human Factors Minute. That comes out next month. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, one, you could do this right now. Stop what you're doing. Just leave us a 5-star review. Say those boys on that podcast, they're pretty nice. 2, you could tell your friends about us, and that actually helps the show grow quite a lot. Or 3, if you have the financial means to and want an access of all the Human Factors minutes that we've made to date, you can always consider supporting us on Patreon. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. I want to thank Mr. Blake Arnsdorff for coming on the show and hanging out with us again. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about, robot arms?
You guys can always find me at Don't Panic UX across social media. LinkedIn is probably the best, or YouTube.
Mr. Barry Kirby, where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about how to pronounce pianist?
We all know that word pronunciation is not my strong point. But anyway, you can find me across social media, Baz_K. Or if you want to listen to some interesting interviews with amazing human factors professionals, then go and find me on 1202 The Human Factors Podcast at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me on our Discord and across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning into Human Factors Cast. Until next time, it depends. Oh, that was nice. We all got to do it together. That was awesome. This feels great, guys. This is like a pipe dream.
This was good. I enjoyed that.
This was a great.
What were we doing again?
What is it that we're doing? No, that was a fantastic discussion. I think. Wow, Blake, do you want to come back and do this again?
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It's good. It was a lot easier than I thought it would have been, given like how long it's been since I've done any public speaking of any kind.
It's like riding a bike. You just hop on again, and
was it just like putting on a comfortable pair of slippers?
Absolutely. Sitting in a comfortable chair on the floor.
Hey, well, if you want to do next week, there's an opening because I'm gonna get my wisdom teeth taken out on Wednesday, and I probably will not be able to talk on Thursday.
Oh my
So-
god.
So you two could take the show and run
Holy
with it.
moly. We'll see. I have some weirdness with the scheduling that I have for design lab students. So let me check
Okay.
and make sure that I don't have anything already scheduled for like the midday slot, but I'm
Sure
happy
thing.
to try and fill in.
Right, I'll likely be here producing anyway behind the scenes. If you need me to jump in and watch
Just
Wumble
memeing
or anything,
In the background.
yeah, I can give you cues too and be like, wrap up in 5 minutes or wrap up in 3. You know, like just the behind the scenes stuff. I'll be here. I just won't be able to.
You can tell us
Communicate.
stuff to ignore.
Hand signals.
Yeah. So let's talk about the last one more thing where Nick, you said that if you're working with somebody in another country, you think it would be hard work for them to be working at like sort of 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and you'd move everything to the middle of the day. It's 11:30 here, dude.
No, I know. The irony was not lost on me. I'm just saying, for the purposes of a daily stand-up, this is wrapping up your day, man. Like for a daily stand-up where you're trying to communicate what you're working on today, what you're working on. So like that was my point with that.
Yeah.
I know you're being cheeky.
You'd be disappointed if I wasn't.
Good.
But, I like that one about the stakeholder meeting though.
Oh God.
What it brought to mind for me 2 very specific meetings that I've had. One was a bunch of years ago where there was this senior director in a room, and I was in a works reps meeting, and of a science center, and this one guy quite belligerent, and he just started talking. Then this other guy who was trying to make a point and this senior director kept on interrupting him, and so this guy just kept on talking, and so then the senior director kept on talking louder, to which point this other guy was belligerently then talking louder. Then this was and I just sat there on my phone going, what is going on here? And that was I think that was the one time when I felt that I was like, actually, I should have just stepped it. I mean, I wasn't the senior person in the room by a long way. This is like a bunch of years ago. And but that was the one time I was sort of sat there going, that shouldn't have happened on anybody's front. You're all professionals. You should have. So the senior director should have been taking the bigger thing and said, right, step back from the conversation. How do we solve this? And because nobody stepped in, I learned so much from that experience. But then
I think we all have people in mind. I certainly had specific people in mind when I pulled that question today.
Yeah, mine came like from basically my first day on a brand new job, having conversations because I was like working on stuff that I had no business working on really, and I knew that, but nobody else did.
Yes.
And like getting in a room with like somebody who is eons ahead of me in a space that I've never worked in. But like, you don't just grind people to the ground because they don't know all the terminology or the acronyms that you have to throw at them. But that was the experience that I remember, like having to have a conversation afterwards, after checking with my manager. I was like, is this going to be what working in this place is like? Because if so, I'll see you never again.
But it's, I think what I can't remember who said it, but it's actually a lot. I find a lot of it, people who are like that, it's because they're not confident in what they're doing. And therefore they have to be, they put on a face so nobody will question them, which I think is interesting. And but it takes a bit of confidence and it takes a bit of experience to actually recognize and reflect on that. Otherwise, because if you go, as you said, if you go into that in a new job, and you sort of got this person who knows it all and they're arrogant and they're, no room for questions, then you just sit there going, oh well, I'm never going to stand up to that then. But yes, it's not nice.
Oh, Barry, that senior director is listening right now. They just typed in chat. Barry, I can't believe you would tell on me.
I still don't like him now, so I don't really care.
Oh, okay. He's supporting the show by watching, so that's
kind of
that's nice.
To do.
Yeah.
But hopefully you'll sign up to be a patron of the show and give us some of that hard-earned cash that I know he got in shares. But anyway.
That would be nice.
Oh well, I've just had a message from my daughter saying after you've done the show, bearing in mind it'll be midnight when we finish. Can you just pick me up? I'm just about finishing clubbing.
Oh,
And I was
there you
like,
go.
right. I've got a 20-minute drive to the next town after this to go and pick her and a friend up. How cool is that? What that well, you've got it all to come, Nick. So with
you know what you should say. You know what you should say is that I don't think 12 o'clock is an appropriate time to be starting this meeting between you and I, and we should reconvene at 5 a.m. But it is your daughter. So, I mean,
it is my daughter, and given that she's 18, she's a university student. This is how I guess old I realize I've got. And she was saying, "Oh yeah, we don't start going out until like to the clubs until midnight." You know, I was like, "Dude, I'm in bed by. I've already had my night out. I've been out. I've had beers and got drunk with my mates and stuff. I'm home in bed by midnight." And then trying to work out how I'm going to stay asleep so I can sober up by the morning. I regularly get messages from her saying, like, getting home like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, it's time for a stand-up now. It's,
there's no way.
It's again that's going back to early career days when you were able to go out for the night before with like colleagues and stuff and rock up to an early morning meeting. Maybe I'm not saying anybody would turn up drunk. But maybe slightly worse for wear. Crack on with your day and power. I just couldn't do that anymore. Just not.
No, I couldn't do that like past 25. I swear, I was done.
Numbers. Hey, both of you are working on some interesting things. Barry, you around communication of human factors to non-human factors people. Would those chats be available to put up on Academy?
Yeah, I
Recorded
see
them,
no
maybe?
reason why not. If we can, because the one I did, the other actually should have recorded that one. I don't know whether we actually did. If we did for that, I'll try and get the stuff because that was to the engineering community.
Awesome.
So it's basically human factors for engineers. And if I can try and get that, put that in. But there are some others. I mean, there's no reason why I couldn't because I've got all of the presentations that I've done. I can always try and do them on camera.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
But yes, we'll see what we can do.
And Blake, you're working on the accessibility stuff. Is that like proprietary for something else, or is that just like a project out of the goodness of your heart?
It is goodness out of my heart for now. Like right now, I'm gonna lead like 2 what they're calling chapters inside of Design Lab. And that's going to be focused on one on accessibility, so helping mentors understand like what that means, how do we integrate it into curriculums, and how do we help students do AX projects like in the real world. So trying to put together skeleton projects and briefs and stuff. And the other one I'm trying to put together is like coding for designers, so like an onboarding ramp for how do you like jump into doing something like using CSS and HTML to something like React in your daily job. So it'll all be my own material until it either flops, or if it works out really well, maybe it'll become part of Design Lab's materials.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could potentially get access to those for Patreon as well. Just I'm trying to build a collection of resources that we've put out there into the world that just in a place that's easily accessible. Speaking of accessibility to everyone, to find. In fact, I have like a whole information architecture of how to organize this stuff within Patreon to make it accessible for new patrons to find this stuff. So that'd be great if we could get some access to that. If not, that's totally fine. If it's done through Design Lab, they probably might not want to.
I mean, I'll own everything because they're not paying me for it. It's totally volunteer. It's something I came up with off of like a student's idea. So a lot of like the content that I've been working on is just going to be unlisted YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Hey, there we go.
Like a couple of repos. So I can definitely give you guys links to all that stuff as it comes together.
That'd be awesome, man. Cool. And I am going to go back and remaster the first 20-something episodes of the podcast and throw those up there as well. It's really interesting the way that Academy is shaping up, because I'm actually developing a course myself on user interviews, just because I've been doing a lot of them in the last couple months, and have some thoughts on how to do it. And I've not necessarily found a way that's been sort of like instructive. it's all been more conceptual. Like you talk to them and ask these types of questions, and it's I'm trying to walk them through the process of like, this is what you need, and this is how I think about organizing things, and this is that type of thing. So I'm developing that. It's slow going, but I want to like put stuff up there as incentives, so that way when March rolls around and we have a new podcast out there and another inlet to support for the show, that we have something to give back to those people. So I'm just trying to think about, it's coming together in a very different way than I thought it would, is what I'm trying to say. And it's pretty awesome thinking about all these disparate resources, like Barry's talks and our past podcasts and, various stuff that we've put together. And like, I'm trying to make it only stuff that we've made, not necessarily freely available courses out there in the world, because I don't want to like...
You don't want to paywall that stuff, yeah.
Well, you can find that, like, even if it's freely available, I don't want to like put it out there just because then it's like we don't have quality control over it. But for everything else, we're the voices of the podcast, and we're the voices of this brand, and I feel like there's a certain authority that comes with that when somebody chooses to support the show. We then are the people giving towards that. So that's where I'm coming from with that. But I mean, like, we could list them, I guess, maybe. I don't know. I'm not opposed to that. Just including them as like educational resources is a different thing. Yeah.
Well, the other thing too, this like gets into a weird content-y thing, but like you can just create, some post or whatever that you cycle through on different pieces of media that you have, whether it's like YouTube posts or stuff you put on Twitter or something you put on LinkedIn. You just like brand it, and it's like a consolidated list. People do that all the time, and it seems to do pretty well.
Yeah, we could do that for like for the public facing stuff, like here's some resources available to the public for that's a good idea, Blake.
Yeah, because I mean, I've got like a starter kit that I give all of my like design students, because there's so much like free stuff on the internet that is actually good. And if like you'll sign up for this person's newsletter, they'll like send you a PDF or whatever. So there's lots of cool things you can do with all that kind of good stuff. The only problem is like it's like what you said, you're not QCing it, and if it goes away, then it's like, okay, that's gone, or it gets outdated, then it's like, okay, this is useless.
It's also there's a almost a pressure there as well, because I found out that a couple of university lecturers give the 1202 podcast as a pre-reading, as a free listening exercise.
They do that with this show too, which is funny. I just find that funny.
But you sort of sit there and go, well, that's okay, that's cool, that's quite exciting. Oh, now the pressure. You've actually got people listening who you're going to, we do have people who we've got influence, but now that you're being pushed, people are being pushed because you're influencing them. Then like, oh, performance anxiety. So, it puts it into a slightly different perspective, I think.
Yeah, I mean, last year I made like I ran into this stupid development problem with a company called Netlify, who's really great, but there was just like a weird kind of issue people would run into if you're deploying a React app for the first time. And so I just made a video about it, and it did really well, but it made me feel super anxious to ever do anything else, because I was like, oh God, I don't know that I can actually help people. How did this happen that I helped anybody? So yeah, totally. Like you start putting things out there that people find useful, and you don't even expect it. I feel like that's the case even with some of the goofy social media stuff that I've done in the past. It's like people latch onto it. It's like, okay, I don't know if I can do this again.
Yeah, exactly.
Make people laugh this way.
Yeah.
Folks have reached out to the show saying, hey, anything related to this topic, I have my students listen to, or my lab students listen to, and I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you. That's fantastic. You do know that we're not experts in that topic, right? Like you understand that we're approaching, and no, it's still just a great discussion, and it helps them understand where the other general human factors generalists stand on those topics. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if that's exactly what you want, then that's exactly what you'll get. I mean, like, we're not promising anything here, but I'm glad you enjoy the discussion. It's really fascinating when, people use your stuff for things that you never intended it. Like, I don't know. When we started this show, it was always meant to be more of like a variety show meets like talking about human factors in the same way that people talk about pop culture, in the sense that like it is something that should be speculated on and talked about. We're not going to come here with like the latest and greatest research. In fact, we tried a little bit of a stint with that for a while, but it just felt too stiff
Also
and not
academic.
I
don't know. I didn't
we
like
tried
That's
it,
why-
and
But that's why this show for me, so obviously before I came on board and I was just listening, was always really neat because there was nowhere else really out of like other podcasts and even other sort of, I guess, adjacent topics where people just have a chat about it. This is an interesting piece of whatever it is, and here's some of the thoughts about it. Here's some implications, because then you sort of feel part of that conversation. Because I always remember the one that always sticks in my mind is what you did around transport planning, and how the fall into like suburbs and stuff, now transport affects that, and how that affected how it was changing poverty demographics. And I was sort of sat there going, oh yeah, that's true, and because I was doing some DIY, and I pen in my hand, and I was sketching stuff out on the wall as you were drawing it, as you were talking it through, because I was trying to visualize where it was in my head, and it was just the way that it talks it through, as a conscious stream of thought rather than a pre-prepared, full on thing, just like anybody else would. Is like, a couple of guys having a drink in a bar and trying to work through a problem. I quite liked.
we're trying to take away the elitism from discussing human factors. It should be more ubiquitous. We can't hide it behind, folks who gatekeep the profession behind education. And sure, education and science are pillars of this field. And yes, but I mean, we need to be accessible. And speaking of all that, hey, this episode is brought to you. See, I was working on a way to fit it all in.
Yeah,
Fit it all in there.
We'll just
You
let
got to crowbar
that
it in. That's
roll.
crowbar.
We'll just let that ticker roll. Yeah, I think, ultimately that was the goal for me, is that it just felt so nobody was doing this. And if they were, it was like behind discussion panels in webinars, and that's not how people consume media now. Webinars still exist, but like they're difficult to get into for reasons that people like to track who attends those. And I just never that's important to know who's attending those, but like, should that be your reason for, again, gatekeeping things behind a webinar?
I mean, this is something I really want to address this year's EHF conference. They're not going to like it, but again, with the interview I did with Stephen Chorrock, now he runs his own Human Factors blog, and it's interesting. So he'll go and hit some really big topics. And I was like, but you're an author, he's published books. He has done like loads of academic books.
Is this the peer review comment?
Yeah, he's a journal editor and all this. So he does all this stuff. But he's like, oh well, you have all that stuff, but who actually truly reads them? I'm like, good, because I don't. And he's like, but if I write a blog, somebody will comment on it, and you'll get some immediacy. You'll get some, you get immediate feedback. And I was like, that's a really fair point, and that's sort of the stuff that we do here. If somebody wants to drop comments into the socials, then we read them, we respond to them, we might change our views on them. Unlikely, because I'm always right, but we will re-educate other people. But no, people come with their own perspective and stuff, which is brilliant, and it just makes it's almost like when we give presentations now at conferences or whatever. I almost hate, well, in fact, I think everybody does, is if you've got 20 minutes to speak, that you're speaking for 20 minutes in a presentation. I want to do about 10 minutes, maybe 15 at a push, but I want a whole chunk of time at the end to say, right, you've got, there's 20 odd people maybe, or 50 people, or 100 people in the room. You're all really, really clever, and this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Get the intelligence out of the room, rather than just the one person on the stage.
It's such a better use of time doing something like that, and it's I feel like it's way more interactive than like this nonsense model we have of this great person needs to get up and tell us all their thoughts. Like there's a time and place for that, but I think like in HF circles or UX or whatever development conferences, like there's enough like people that understand what's going on in the room, and even if they don't, I think what I think the podcast did really well was like get Nick and I to think about applications and implications of the science we knew from school. And I think that's the value of what you're talking about, is just, you know, posing something to a room full of people who understand a concept and let them actually run with it and have a discussion.
So, yeah, because as you said earlier, Nick, the value you get out of a conference is not necessarily the presentation itself, but when you grab them afterwards in the hallway and sort of say, "Oh, I didn't realize you were working on that," blah blah blah, and you then you get the value. Now imagine having that and everybody else were chipping into that as well. It's just got where the penny dropped for me, I think, was wrapping up last year's EHF conference. I got asked to do one of the closeout speeches, and I was sort of sat there going, like there's a couple hundred people in this room, of which, you know, we've heard of 10 of you because of the presentations and stuff, and in a thing. We haven't heard of the other 190 of you. Yet you've all got thoughts, you've all got ideas, and we've just missed the opportunity. We've missed especially after COVID. You know, we've missed the opportunity to interact. I might have interacted with you at the bar, but I can't remember that because that was last night and I was 2 bottles in. But you know, it's we as you we need to get away from this, as you say, Blake, from this one person standing at the front being all authoritative. Some people have got some really good stuff to say. That's why you have your keynote speakers. But they should really just inspire the rest of it. But there we go. It's the academic model, and we won't get away from it for a while yet.
I don't know. I'm hoping that like there's enough people that see what's going on with like social media or whatever that will change, because like people like Andrew Huberman and all of his like neuroscience stuff that he's just putting out for free as a Stanford, you know, university professor on his YouTube channel that's had massive success. I'm hoping that there's like lower levels of that, like what's done here with the stuff y'all do, Nick, like with the various like YouTube things you do, but also like there's got to be other professors that are, you know, maybe younger in age, maybe have experience, you know, just like talking and making things. So hopefully it just continues we see an academic model change, and that's like a positive product of social media versus so many of the negative things we see.
Yeah, I hate that this message is going to get buried, and I might actually just take this and post it as a bonus episode on our feed, because this is a really important conversation. And if anybody's listening to this right now who has sort of the desire to get started with that type of thing but lacks the resource, reach out to us. We'd be happy to share what we know and sort of some lessons learned from starting this thing, and heck, even collaborate on some of that stuff in order to get more, I don't know, accessible education out there for folks who, you know, and resources for those in the field. Because I think, yeah, you're right. This is an absolutely, you see it happen in other fields, but not here so much. And we need to make it more accessible and inspire more people and get people to think about different things. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to repackage this and put it on our feed. Typically, the post shows are for you know, anyone who tunes in live, or you know, we put the full episode out on our Patreon, and they'll still get that. But I think this is a really important discussion, and I want it to be out there in the world.
Fair enough. We've given birth to
it is technically out there in the world.
It is, but I mean, like, repackaged in a way that most of our audience is going to hear it. So that being said, what are your final thoughts on this topic before we send it out to our audience?
I mean, the one thing I was going to add was the other bit that made it work for me last year was EHF was split into the virtual version and the live version, right? And when you think about what people want, people want to get published, and that's what you use conferences for. Conferences and journals, get your paper peer reviewed, and you get it published. And part of that arduous process is you have to stand up there and present your paper. It's part of the pain. But you rarely then have time at the end of it. You got maybe 2, maybe 3, 4 minutes to have a discussion on that paper because of the way it works. So that worked brilliantly online. being able to present your paper, get it out there. Actually, we did pre-record of the paper, which was fine. But then you're there in the chat. People are asking questions. You could there respond to the chat. You presented it. It takes a lot of pressure off you presenting. And so you actually get some really good feedback. That worked brilliantly online. So do that. Use the online stuff to present your stuff. Then go to a physical conference and talk about it. Take it further. Work at it. Maybe use it as a basis of a workshop or something like that. But really think about the mediums and break away from this model of we go and sit in a room and listen to people talk, because we can do that online in our own time, or on a podcast or a YouTube rant over.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up the post show. Blake, any other thoughts?
I just think you guys are hitting on a good point. And Nick, I think you've done a great job like influencing HFES here in the States of like, how do you take this stuff that you make and like make content out of it in a way that people can consume it and actually use it? And then you can have more meaningful conversations and people don't feel left out or left behind because of, monetary problems or whatever it may be. So it's a cool concept. I hope we just continue to see it evolve.
I agree. Well, Barry, you got to go. Blake, you got to go. I have also got to go. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And Blake, it's so nice to have you back on the pre and post show and show.
Such a pleasure. Thank you both for having me back.
Thank you for kicking me out.
As we wrap up, we're gonna just throw this out there one more time and see you next week. Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate